Check your electricity bill from last summer. Find the months where the air conditioning was running. Now look at that number. In the United States, air conditioning accounts for about 6% of all electricity produced in the country. Americans alone spend roughly $29 billion a year just to keep their buildings cool. And here is the thing nobody tells you about that number. Every single dollar of it is paying to solve a problem that was already solved 3,000 years ago. Without electricity, without refrigerants, without a single moving part. And in some cases, the ancient solution worked better than ours does today. This is the engineering story that modern architecture is only now beginning to remember. Start with the physics. When air moves, it carries heat with it. When water evaporates, it absorbs heat from its surroundings. When a surface faces the open night sky, it radiates heat outward into space and cools down. These three principles, convection, evaporation, and radiation, are the complete toolkit of ancient climate engineering. No chemistry, no electricity, no mechanical compressors. Just physics that has been operating in the same way since the Earth had an atmosphere. Ancient engineers didn't invent these principles. They simply understood them well enough to build buildings around them. The oldest and most widespread ancient cooling technology is the windcatcher. In Persian, it is called a badgir, which translates literally as wind gripper. The earliest surviving examples date to around 3,000 years ago in ancient Persia, in the region that is now Iran, but archaeological evidence suggests the basic concept is considerably older. A badgir is a tall tower built on top of a building, open on one or more sides depending on the prevailing wind direction of the location. Wind entering the opening is channeled downward through the tower into the building below. But the tower isn't just a funnel, it is a heat exchanger. As the air moves down through the narrow shaft, it passes along the cool thermal mass of the tower walls, which are insulated from the direct sun by the tower's own thickness. The air arrives in the living space below meaningfully cooler than the air outside. And because hot air rises and cool air sinks, the system is self-perpetuating. Hot room air rises and exits through secondary openings, pulling more cool air down from the tower in a continuous loop that requires no power source beyond the wind itself. Some badgirs were designed to face multiple directions simultaneously, with internal dividers separating the shaft into sections, each section catching wind from a different direction and routing it through different paths before delivering it to the rooms below. In the city of Yazd in central Iran, which sits in one of the hottest and driest regions on Earth, badgirs have been operating continuously for thousands of years. Buildings in Yazd regularly maintain interior temperatures of 20 to 25 degrees Celsius when the outside temperature exceeds 40 degrees. Modern air conditioning running on electricity produces roughly the same temperature differential. The badgir achieves it with geometry and prevailing wind. A modern building air conditioner consumes between 1 and 2 kilowatts of electricity every hour it runs. A badgir consumes exactly nothing. Now, here is where the engineering gets extraordinary. The ancient Persians didn't stop at moving air. They combined the badgir with a second system to make the cooling dramatically more effective. Beneath many ancient Persian buildings runs a qanat, an underground water channel carrying groundwater from mountain sources across the desert to the city. In the most sophisticated ancient buildings, the badgir shaft passed directly over or alongside the qanat channel before delivering air to the living spaces above. Air moving over cold water picks up moisture and loses heat through evaporation. By the time it reached the rooms, it had been cooled twice. First by the thermal mass of the tower walls, then by the evaporative cooling effect of the water below. The result was not just cool air, it was cool, humid air in the middle of a desert. Engineers designing passive cooling systems for modern buildings in the Middle East are currently studying these exact configurations. The ancient Persians had already solved the optimization problem they are trying to solve now. But the Persians were not the only ancient engineers working on this problem. 3,300 years ago, in the Egypt of Pharaoh Ramesses II, palace servants were assigned to fan wet reeds in doorways and windows. This was not luxury, this was engineering. Wet reeds evaporating in a dry desert breeze produced the same evaporative cooling effect as a modern swamp cooler, dropping the temperature of the incoming air by as much as 10 degrees before it entered the room. The physics are identical to a device you can buy at a hardware store today for cooling a garage or workshop. Ancient Egypt implemented it at scale using woven plant fiber and desert air, requiring no infrastructure beyond the Nile's water supply and a human arm. But the most extraordinary ancient cooling achievement is not about summer heat at all. It is about making ice in the desert in winter and keeping it through summer. The Yakhchal, which in Persian means ice pit, is a structure that managed to produce and store ice in regions where summer temperatures regularly exceeded 37 degrees Celsius. The production process used a principle that modern engineers call radiative cooling, and it is the same physics that makes the hood of your car cold and damp on a clear night, even when the temperature never dropped below freezing. On clear nights, surfaces exposed to the open sky radiate heat outward into space faster than they absorb it from the surrounding air. If the surface is water in a shallow pond, shaded from the ground's retained daytime heat by a low wall on the southern side, and exposed to a clear sky on a dry winter night, the water can drop below freezing and form ice, even when the air temperature is several degrees above zero. Ancient Persian engineers built precisely this system: shallow evaporation ponds with south-facing insulating walls adjacent to the Yakhchal storage structures, and harvested ice from them on winter nights. The ice was then packed into the Yakhchal below ground, surrounded by a specific mixture of clay, sand, and egg whites known as sarooj, which formed an insulating layer so effective that ice produced in winter survived in storage through the following summer. In the middle of a desert, without electricity, without refrigeration, without insulation foam, just geometry, material science, and an understanding of how heat moves between surfaces and the sky. But passive cooling in the ancient world wasn't only a Middle Eastern achievement. At Mohenjo-daro, in modern Pakistan, one of the largest cities of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, built approximately 4,500 years ago, archaeologists have found evidence of a citywide ventilation system built directly into the urban plan. Streets were laid out with specific orientations relative to the prevailing seasonal winds. Buildings were designed with internal courtyards that created natural convective airflow through the structure. Ventilation shafts built into the walls of major buildings channeled air in predictable patterns. This was not coincidental. It was deliberate city-scale climate engineering, implemented across an urban area housing an estimated 40,000 people, predating any comparable European urban planning by thousands of years. The Romans brought their own approach. Aqueducts delivering cold water from mountain sources were not only used for drinking and bathing. In the wealthiest Roman villas, cold aqueduct water was circulated through pipes built into the floors and walls of rooms before being discharged into garden fountains. The system worked exactly like modern radiant cooling, absorbing heat from the room air through the cold pipe surfaces. Roman engineers understood that water circulating through a building's structure could maintain comfortable interior temperatures, even in the heat of a Mediterranean summer. Modern passive cooling architects call this hydronic radiant cooling. The Romans were doing it 2,000 years ago with gravity and stone channels. So why did we abandon all of this? The answer is not that modern air conditioning is better physics. It is that modern air conditioning is faster to install and easier to retrofit into buildings that were never designed for passive cooling. When electricity became cheap and abundant in the 20th century, it was more economically convenient to bolt a mechanical unit to a wall than to redesign entire buildings around natural airflow principles. The ancient solutions required the cooling system to be integrated into the architecture from the beginning. You cannot add a Badgir to a glass office tower, but you also cannot make a glass office tower work without enormous quantities of electricity because it was never designed to work with the climate it sits in. Ancient builders designed for the climate first. We design for convenience first and pay the electricity bill for the difference every month. Modern architects are now paying attention. The Eastgate Center in Harare, Zimbabwe, designed in 1996, uses a ventilation system explicitly modeled on termite mound airflow principles that overlap precisely with ancient Badgir physics. It uses 90% less energy for cooling than a conventional building of the same size. The Pearl Academy of Fashion in Jaipur, India, built in 2008, incorporates a modern Badgir system that eliminates the need for mechanical air conditioning entirely. Buildings in Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, and Dubai are increasingly being designed with qanat-inspired underground cooling channels and windcatcher towers. The sustainable architecture movement is, in significant part, a rediscovery of what ancient Persian, Egyptian, and Indus Valley engineers understood 3,000 years ago. Go back to that electricity bill. The number on it is the price of forgetting. Every ancient culture that built in hot climates figured out how to manage heat without consuming energy because they had no choice. We had the choice, and for about 70 years, we made a different one. Now the climate, the energy costs, and the engineering evidence are all pointing back in the same direction. The air was always moving. The water was always cold underground. The night sky was always radiating heat into space. The physics never changed. We just stopped listening to it. If this changed how you think about the building you are sitting in right now, subscribe to Stone Age Engineers and let me know in the comments which ancient cooling system surprised you the most, because the most ingenious engineers who ever lived figured this out without a single kilowatt of electricity.